All right, we're on to applying our Aqua coat now. I'm gonna give you some tips and tricks applying the Aqua coat. We've got all of our sanding done. I started applying some of the Aqua coat to get the stuff drying, but I'm gonna give you some tips and tricks applying it. I've got my tools. I pulled out one of my other tools that I really like for applying Aqua coat. And this is actually one of those things you apply your those glass covers on, or your covers on your cell phones, iPhones. And these things work absolutely great for applying Aqua coat in small areas too. But the process is pretty simple. I like having a bucket of water. I've got a bucket of water here, warm water, so I can continually clean my hands or clean my tools as I need to. The Aqua coat is a water-based coating, so it cleans up really easy and your tools clean really easy, but you don't want it drying on your tools or it won't go on smoothly. So I'm going to start applying it, and when I'm working on a little door like this, I'm just gonna use a small tool. So I'll say I'm just gonna scoop a little bit of the Aqua coat up, and I'm gonna start applying it on my door. And I like to go crossways on my very first coat. So I'm gonna crossways to get it down in that grain. Gonna work it in, just like this. And then I'm just gonna scrape it off. I like to scrape it off going with the grain on my first coat. Now, I'm not gonna leave very much behind. The more you leave behind, the more sanding you got to do. A credit card works really, really great because it's a nice sharp surface for taking off the excess. And I'm just gonna continue working right along, working around these edges. This process isn't a super fast process. This does take time to do. So you wanna make sure, if you're a professional painter and you're doing grain fillers, make sure you bid it correctly. And I typically, on an average size kitchen, I'm typically charging $500 extra on top of my bid if I gotta do any grain filling. Because it's a process that does take time, but your cabinets will look absolutely amazing if you take the time and fill the grain. Now, once again, it does come down to your customer, what your customer's expectations are. There have been times that I have not filled the grain on cabinets because the customer's expectation, they wanted to see the grain. So I'm just gonna continue working it in. You do need to let it set about an hour before sanding, and some of that is gonna be according to your temperatures. I cranked up the temperature in here, above 70 degrees, so it'll dry a lot faster. When you're working on these contoured surfaces, you can scrape it off with a credit card, or you can even wipe it off with a finger. On a contoured surface like this, I can take and wipe my finger on the edges just like that, and that works really well too. But I'm gonna get the bulk of it off with a credit card. And when I'm doing my sanding, I'm gonna be sanding using a 320 grit. You don't wanna use anything too rough of sandpaper because it'll actually pull too much of your Aqua coat out of the grain. So once I get the bulk of that off, I'm gonna wipe these rounded edges with my finger to smooth it out, and we'll set that aside to dry. So there's what it looks like. Now I got my drying rack right here. I'll do one of the larger, here's a larger one right here that's dry, and we're gonna sand that one here in a minute, and I'll show you the second coat. So about every couple drawers or doors, you're gonna wanna clean your tools because the Aqua coat begins to dry on there. So I'm gonna hit it crossways. I'm gonna scrape it off. Just like that. This Aqua coat, one of these quarts, a quart does about an average size set of kitchen cabinets. If you are doing just one vanity or a small, really small cabinet, a pint of it would be good enough. If you're doing a really large set of kitchen cabinets, or you want to buy more because you're doing multiple sets, because you do a lot of kitchen cabinets, you can get it in gallons also. I'll leave a link down in the video, the description, where you can get this product if you're interested in using it. Once again, I've used multiple grain fillers. I've used some of the water-based, not water-based, and this is by far the easiest grain filler I've ever used. Easiest to apply, easiest to sand. If you have any questions about odor, it's when it comes to painting kitchen cabinets, if you're doing lacquers, it's really strong odor. This product has a very, very mild odor to it. It's I can barely smell it at all. So I'm gonna wipe it down with my finger. You can wear gloves if you don't want to be getting this on your fingers. And now I'm gonna clean, after this door, I'm gonna clean my tools off. So once again, this stuff dries extremely fast. And I've got just warm water. So it just depends on, you know, how often you need to clean it. Just depends on how warm it is where you're at. Have yourself a nice, you know, table working surface that you can apply the stuff on. And I'll show you, I got the door here. So here's a raised panel door. We're working on multiple projects. I got this vanity makeover I'm working on. And then I'm also working on another project. It's a laundry room we're working on. So now we got a raised panel door. What I don't want to do is get my Aqua coat in these edges if I'm not caulking my panels. And I don't caulk my panels. So you got to be patient and you've got to be careful not to get it in there. So just take your time and just work around those edges, because if it gets in there, it just doesn't look good where it bridges the gap. So I'm gonna use something, you know, tight like this credit card. I'm just gonna take my time and I'm gonna go along my edges here. See how I'm just, and if you do get some in there, I just would use my 2-edged knife to scrape it out, the blade. So now I've got it on there. I could use a larger tool to fill in. I could scrape it off now. And there's the center panel right there. Now I can begin working on my edges. And I'm gonna be very careful working on this routed edge right here too. I can use my finger, I can use a tool, I can cut a piece of my plastic that I have. But once again, usually the grain issue is not a problem on these routed edges, but you can even use a rag. I can take my wet rag and just, you know, wipe that routed edge just like that. Once again, it's a water-based product, so you can just wipe it off. with a wet rag. One of the big advantages using Aqua coat. Now once I get it all over this panel, I'm going to use my wet rag to wipe all these edges. You can see I could take my tool here that contours to the edges also. Nice catch. If you do wipe it with a wet rag, it is going to slow down the dry time. So you got to definitely take that into consideration. I'm going to try to scrape off more off this panel. It's getting close to where I like it right there. So that's the first coat. We're going to be adding 3 coats on here. Set that side to dry. Then we'll begin working on our face frames now. If you have a lot of dust, definitely want to wipe things down. Get the dust off before you do any Aqua coat. These panels, side panels, are actually paper, but there's some holes that I did fill. I'm just running the Aqua coat over, but now I'm just gonna do these face frames. Face frames are definitely a lot faster. See, just working it in, pressing it in, that grain, filling all that grain up, scraping off the excess. You can see why I used to, when they first came out with this stuff, it was clear and you couldn't actually see where the grain filler was, and they improved it by making it white. Now you can see all the grain that it's filled. I'm gonna clean my tools once again, clean my hands. Now, if you're working on a door like this, and you got routed edges, kind of complicated routed edges, if you need to, scrape some out of the edges before it dries, you could just I just use my 5-in-1 to scrape it out of there so you don't have to sand it. If you get some down inside your gaps right here, you could just pull it out, with the knife portion of your 2-edge knife, and that way it's not bridging that gap. You don't want it to bridge the gap because it won't look as nice. But that's drying right there pretty fast, and we're going to be putting on another coat here soon. All right, so I'm just continuing right along here. I'm gonna clear my space a little bit here so I have more room. We got a bunch of doors, larger doors we're gonna be doing. So we're not gonna be doing any sanding till our first coat dries. So that first coat, you definitely wanna let that first coat, depending on, temperature, dry time, as manufacturers, recommendations is an hour or more. I've seen it dry as quick as 30 minutes and sandable. So on your final coat, your third coat, if you're applying 3 coats or 2 coats, you would, if you have the ability, let it set overnight, do a light sand with 320. I'm gonna be using Aqua Silk. So Aqua Silk, very fine Aqua Silk, is rated at 320 grit. For contoured surfaces, I'm using the 1/2-inch sponges. I also have the 5mm, 10mm. If I'm doing just flat surfaces like side panels and stuff, the Aqua Silk, I just use the 320. And this is, I'm gonna be using my vacuum system, the Aqua Sand Vacuum right there. So I have a dust-free environment when I'm sanding, and I'm not making a lot of dust. So we're gonna continue working on some of these big doors, check on how our drying's going on. We got one of them. This one has been over an hour. I'm gonna sand this one and show you what it looks like doing the next coat. All right, so I got my sander set up here. I'm going to show you. So this has got some routed, contoured edges on here. I'm going to take a 1/2 inch very fine sponge, so it's 320. I'm just going to put that on here. We're going to sand it. Once again, it's just a light sand, basically, so your second coat bonds really well. So you do a light sand, but on any of the like heavy areas where there's too much Aqua coat, you'll just sand that down a little bit more. But so there's the door. So that's sanded now. And now I can apply my second coat of Aqua coat, like rubbing it down with a tack cloth to make sure all the dust is off of it. So if you do get too much Aqua coat on there, a 320 is not going to take it down very fast. You can use different grits. I usually keep some fine and medium grit sandpaper. I've got it. Let's see if it's not on the table right here. I got super fine there. I'm going to grab some just in case you get some really heavy spots. I just switch out my sandpaper really fast, and that's what's great about the hook and loop 3x4 sander. You can switch it really quick. Now we're going to apply a second coat, and it's just the same way. I can use a credit card. I can use a tool. I got multiple tools. I'll show you using this tool here in just a second, but I've got some flat areas. I'm gonna apply, I went opposite direction last time when I applied it. I'm gonna hit it going with the grain this time and then against the grain, coming back the next way. So 2 coats. I'm gonna, after I sand this coat, I'm gonna turn on my inspection light I got right here. I'm gonna check it out and see if 2 coats was enough to cover it or if I need to do a 3rd coat. I mean, it looks like I've got it covered pretty good. You can see I'll use this tool right here on these edges to scrape it out. Just it's looking pretty good. So there's a second coat. You can see it's a little bit more grain is showing up, so a little bit more is filled. All right, so we've got 1 coat on everything. I've got 2 coats on some things. I'm going to do some sanding. Now I did find my fine. So I've got fine and very fine sandpaper. So if I got some places where there's a lot of Aqua coat that I left behind, I can use like a fine, which is a 220. The very fine is a 320. So I'm going to start sanding these. I do have options where I can just use, flat paper, or I can use sponges. I can use 5 mils or 10 mil sponges. I think I'm gonna hit these flat portions with my 5 mil sponge. And here we go, the sanding. So I just got my EcoSand 3x4 sander and my vacuum hooked up. So you can see I'm sanding. I switched to a 1/2 inch sponge to do the contoured edge portion right there. Makes it a lot easier, but my 5 mil sponge or even just flat paper makes it a lot faster sanding the flat portions. If you're using the flat paper, I don't have one. I ordered another one. Having a pad saver underneath here will save your pad if you have somebody that's not using your sander properly, goes through the paper and could end up destroying the hook and loop on the bottom portion. So use a pad saver. I do have a pad saver over here, a sponge one. a stiff sponge that you can use. So basically it's just hook and loop on both sides. You put it on there, and now if you burn through your paper, it's going to save your pad from getting ruined. So I could put, my paper on there, and I have now a sponge just like this sponge, and I have a pad saver on it. But I'm very careful when I'm sanding. And once again, I've got a pad saver coming because I can't find my other one. But it's just going to make sanding your flat surfaces a lot faster, and it's easy and quick to just switch from different styles of paper. So when it comes to sanding, typically when I'm doing cabinets or even in my trailer, I keep the flat, just paper, sandpaper that's not a sponge, and I always have the holes because I use it with a vacuum, or I keep the 1/2-inch sponges. And if I need anything in between, I'm using pad savers, in between. And there are other options. There's what we call 10 millimeter. They're a little bit stiffer. And then there's 5 millimeter, which are right here. So you have multiple options of sanding with the 3x4 sander of different style pads. But once again, I typically only keep in stock in my trailer these two styles right here for doing cabinets. So I do my flats with just the paper, and then I do my contoured edges with the 1/2-inch sponges. Now we're gonna get on, I've got 2 coats on some stuff. I'm gonna apply a 3rd coat on some of the stuff, and then a 2nd coat on another. I do gotta sand my face frame, so I'm gonna sand the face frame now here. We are working on multiple projects, so I've got our doors over here we're working on that were already painted doors. So I'm gonna do fine flat on those edges. We've got, so fine is a 220, so I'm gonna throw a 220 on here. I had a 220 somewhere. Here's my 220 right there. First sand on these flat panels with a 220. All right, so let's get on with our 2nd coat. The 2nd coat is just a lot like the 3rd coat, but I am going to turn my inspection light on because I do want to see what my 1st coat and my sanding has filled and how much more I do got to fill. Because if you got a good inspection light, you can tell whether you need to add a 3rd coat or not. I got this door right here that's got 2 coats. We're going to take a look at it, see what it looks like. All right, so this door right here, we've got 2 coats on it. It's been sanded 2 times. I'm gonna take a look at this. I'm just gonna use my inspection light. I'm gonna look down this door, and this actually looks pretty good. I would say that would probably be acceptable at 2 coats, except I see a spot right here and here that I completely missed. And so that's the value of an inspection light right here. And once again, this just comes down to customers' expectations. What do they expect, out of this makeover of this cabinet? I'm gonna look at this one. This one there was a lot of water damage on this one because it's a vanity, so it's probably getting wet quite a bit. It's one of the ones, the doors that open up, maybe it's where the toothbrushes were or something like that. And so the grain was a lot deeper, the finish was gone. This one right here is a drawer, and this one looks good. I mean, the whole thing looks like I don't even need any more. Right here, this corner is a little bit light, but I think my 2 top coats would actually fill that in. But I'm just gonna go apply, and that's only 1 coat on that right here. This one's 1 coat. I'm gonna just go and apply 1 more coat on all these, use my inspection light so I can see what's going on here and what I've missed and what I haven't missed. I'm gonna use a microfiber cloth to wipe these down, get the dust off of them. Once again, we've sanded in between coats, so our Aqua coat bonds well. On the back sides of the doors, I only do 1 coat on my back sides. So now I can see I'm using my inspection light to fill. I hit those spots that I can see that I missed. right here, I can see and you probably can't see it in the camera. Maybe you can, maybe you can't, but see how good the cameraman is. So I'm gonna get my knife, and now I'm just gonna scrape the whole top. And what happens if you over sand, you sand too much, use too heavy of a grit, you're gonna remove too much of the aqua coat out of the grain, and you're not gonna get really good results. You do want to sand enough that you're getting rid of the peaks and valleys of the clear coat that was underneath. Just gonna try to keep it off my hands the best I can. I always try to look neat and tidy, for just in case the customer comes walking in and sees me working on their $1,000 vanity or working on their $10,000 kitchen cabinet paint job. I might end up getting some questions in this video on how much I charge to do cabinets, and I'll give you a little hint. I charge per door or drawer front, and now I have extra charges that I charge, and one of them is if the cabinets are oak cabinets and I have to fill grain, I have an additional charge of $500 just to fill the grain on the cabinets on a small set of kitchen cabinets, and that grain filling process could run up to as high as $1,000 to fill the grain on the cabinet. So you definitely, if you run it, if you've never done this on a set of kitchen cabinets before and you bid them the same way and you end up grain filling, it's going to take you a lot more time, and you'll probably end up losing money if you don't add an additional charge to it. So just cruising right along, looking in my inspection light. So I can see like on my ends right here, right there. I can feel that with my finger. Got that one done. I can look at it in the light, and you can even see if you got too heavy of aqua coat. And I typically, even on my first coat, I'm typically using an inspection light on all my coats all the time, but I didn't do it this time on the first coat because in the camera lighting, it's kind of messes up our camera lighting, and you couldn't see what's going on as well. So I just did without the inspection light the very first time. It doesn't, the inspection light's not as important because you're just really putting the aqua coat on the whole door, because you got to get everything covered. But I can see that's looking pretty good there. I can see this whole side I missed. That's what happens when you're talking and videoing. Sometimes you have a tendency to miss things. Talking, teaching, educating, all at the same time. Now I'm gonna, got this door here. I'm gonna do second coat on this door. And once again, I do not take and caulk floating panels anymore on doors, and so I'm not caulking them on this door right here. There is a time and a place for everything, and there's a time and a place to caulk them. And I agree with painters that do make the decision to caulk them, but I'm not caulking these here. And so this is a real difficult situation to deal with right there, because it's hard to get aqua coat on that routed edge without getting it in that crack, because I don't want to get it in that crack. So this door looks pretty good. Now, if you're trying to give yourself a guitar finish, on these cabinets, one coat, 2 coats is not going to be enough. You're going to have to be skimming probably 5 coats of Aqua coat on these doors, but I've never run into anybody that wants a guitar-like finish on their cabinets. If you apply it in multiple different directions, it is going to fill the grain better. So apply it in one direction. One time you do it, on the next coat, try to apply it, in the next direction. If you can, remember what direction you went. In grain is always pretty heavy. Work on that in grain. All right, we're gonna set this panel. So I got one more door to do, and then I'm gonna hit my face frame. See this? This door looks, the drawer front looks pretty dang good too. This one, 2 coats is gonna be enough on this one. Also, the one's gonna take 3 coats. So we're almost done with our aqua coating process, filling all this grain. Another thing I haven't said about Aqua Coat, it is a low VOC product. If you have a client that's concerned about, VOCs inside their house, if you're working in the house, it's a low VOC product. So you'd be confident, you're not putting VOCs in the air inside their house. So it looks like I've got all the face frame done. There we have it. Now we're gonna let that dry. I'm gonna do a final sand. So once again, my final sand, I'm gonna be using a very fine sandpaper, which is a 320. I even sometimes go even a little bit finer than that. You definitely want to make sure it's really fine. So 320 or greater. That way you're not pulling any of the aqua coat out of the grain and exposing the grain again. And your final sand, you should be, your last coat of aqua coat should be really tight, and that way you don't have to do a lot of sanding and you don't have to over sand, so you're leaving the aqua coat in the grain. So I'm gonna get this cleaned up, get my tools cleaned up one last time, and sand, inspect, and see what happens from there. All right, there you have it. We've got our first coat of aqua coat done on our vanity, and magically it's already finished right here. I wanted to give you guys a sneak preview of what this thing looks like finished. It looks like a glass. Now it's gonna take multiple coats, so stay tuned. I'm gonna show you how we do more coats of aqua coat to eventually get this final look. It looks great. Stay tuned for that video and the video painting this thing. If you haven't seen us prepping it, we got the videos prepping it, showing you everything you need to do to turn a $25 vanity into this masterpiece. If you got any questions or comments, leave it in the comment section below. We love to answer them. We love to hear your tips and tricks also. And don't forget, a simple way to help support our channel by subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell. It just lets us know you enjoy watching our videos. It's free. It's always going to be for now and ever. So subscribe, hit the notification bell. Give us a thumbs up if you've enjoyed the video and you appreciate it. And once again, we'll see you on the next video, applying more coats of aqua coat and getting it finalized for the painting process. Out.